I think that was the cuts and the decision to do that was kind of centered around some very early directives that they were given to play with.
Thanks for doing this, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Um, well, first of all, you're the second guy from past CrossFit HQ on the podcast. A couple months ago, I had Mars come on.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and he had quite a story to tell us. It was near the beginning of them filming for the Buttery Bros and all that stuff. And you to maybe explain a little bit who's Tommy Marquez and like where did this story come from? Where does start from the beginning? How did you get involved into CrossFit and HQ, and how like you left and started probably talking about like talking elite fitness and all that stuff?
Yeah. To start, Tommy Marquez is just your average guy who likes to do CrossFit and likes sports and likes covering the sport of fitness a ton. You know, your typical avid CrossFitter. But I found CrossFit in late 2008, early 2009. My best friend from growing up lives across the highway from the ranch in Aromas. So he lives maybe a mile as the crow flies from the ranch. And around that time, his cousin, who also went to high school with Dave Castro and Castro's older brother, Kenny, had discovered CrossFit as a way of getting his life back together. He had kind of been given the talk from his doctor saying that, like, if you don't lose some weight, you're not going to see your kids grow old kind of talk. And so he reached out to the Castros and started training CrossFit with them at the ranch, and had lost like almost 100 pounds. And so he reached out to, so my best friend's cousin reached out to us at some point because we were super into training and fitness. We had just finished college at the time. And he was like, hey, you guys need to try this CrossFit thing. It's pretty wild. And I think you'll like it. And my best friend had gone a few times before me and was like, yeah, you need to come try this out. We thought we were in shape. We're not in shape. This will show us what being in shape can really look like. And walked up, did my first class, got destroyed. We actually ran the hill, the famous hill in Aromas, as our warm-up, which would become an everyday thing. And I was hooked right away. Me and my best friend both were super competitive with one another, obviously, because we like to push each other. But something clicked for me right, like almost immediately after I was over. I had played sports my entire life and was, up through college, and was still looking for that physical outlet. And in some regards, I still needed some level of competition, just personally, because I like to push myself. It doesn't necessarily have to be against anyone, but I like some of the kind of inherent competition that's baked into CrossFit, with like, competing against yourself to be better. And that all just kind of made sense when I walked in and did that first workout. And so I continued to train at the ranch. Eventually got my level 1, helped open up an affiliate underneath the ranch umbrella, alongside Dave's older brother. And we ran that affiliate for a few years. And then just through going to events and talking to people, and my girlfriend likes to joke that I could talk to the wall, if you gave me enough time, just because I just enjoy talking shop and shooting the breeze, and I enjoy talking with people. And so I guess I must have talked to a handful of CrossFit HQ people, because someone reached out to me in 2011, asking me if I would help them out with some of their media efforts at regionals that year. In 2011 was the first year of the Reebok contract, the first full season of the Reebok contract. It was the first year of the new regional format with the open and everything like that. And at the time, there were 17 regional competitions taking place around the world. And they were going to be sending teams to that to capture and edit videos to cover the competition, We didn't do anything live back then. It was all post-production stuff. And they needed someone who understood CrossFit and the sport of CrossFit enough to be able to help dictate some of that content and decipher some of that for their media teams. Because at the time, you didn't just have people running around in the media space that knew CrossFit. You know, there's a handful maybe, but it wasn't as widely prevalent as it is now. And so that was my job, along with, you know, being kind of a basic production assistant, carrying equipment, moving stuff, shipping it from one location to the next. And I was on the road for 6 weeks. And that turned into them offering me to help out at the games that year with them, which turned into them offering me to help out again at regionals the following year, and then again at games that following year, along with coming into the office pretty regularly to help out with some of the like basic production stuff for the update show at the time, which was actually, it wasn't in a studio, it was in the break room. It was set up at a desk in the break room at the office. And then basically every time they asked me to do something, I told them yes, and I would do it. And over time, they just kept having me back, and my role kept expanding, and I kept kind of basically finding ways to keep myself involved and pitching ideas. And I loved studying the sport. So when it came to the update show, I loved like pitching ideas and content and stuff to the people that were on at the time, which is Pat Sherwood and Roy McKernan and Miranda Alcaraz. Now it was Miranda Oldroyd at the time, Nicole Christensen, and a bunch of other people that were on. And that just kind of continued to grow into eventually where I'm at now, where after presenting so much content to them, they asked if I would present it on camera. And before you know it, I was working as in one of their main analysts and hosts for for the CrossFit Games.
Holy shit. I did not know you were that early into the picture. Man.
I'm not as early as some, but I've been around a little bit.
It's pretty early. I mean, if you trained at the ranch and all that stuff, I mean, like that must have been something crazy to see like the sport evolve from that point.
Yeah, it was interesting because a lot of people, I don't know if a lot of the like newer people in the arena or I guess the community know, but the 2010 games was supposed to be in Aromas. That was the first year of the games at the StubHub Center, but that kind of happened by mishap. I remember at my level 1 that year, they actually gave out shirts to everyone at the level 1 that said 2010 Aromas as like a promo for the games that year. And then some issues happened with the Monterey County, which is the county that we live in, with permitting and things like that. So last minute, they had to jump up and go find a new venue and move to the StubHub Center. So, but yeah, it was kind of crazy to see it going from, and I think that really kind of kickstarted it fast tracked kind of some of the production and magnitude of the games from that standpoint. Because before in Aromas, it's a relatively small venue. It's a ranch. There's basically a shed where a lot of the indoor stuff was happening, where the athlete area was. And then it was all done outside on this like concrete slab where there's some pull-up bars and a massive hill. And there's limitations to that programming and size-wise. And then suddenly they were thrust into this new venue that, quite frankly, at the time in 2010 was a little bit too big for the games. The StubHub Center was, used to hosting like world-class tennis events, boxing matches. Right next door, in the StubHub Center now is, where like the LAFC plays their soccer games, tons of stuff. At the time, I believe it was the training location for the LA Galaxy. And so that kind of almost mandated to the games, like, hey, we either need to grow to fill this space or, risk, being a kid wearing his dad's clothes, it just doesn't quite fit. And so that kind of fast tracked everything. And honestly, it felt like it happened overnight to me. When you're kind of involved in the mix and we just constantly like going, and all of a sudden you lift your head up and you realize how far you've gone, it's one of those things where like when you're busy, you don't realize how quickly time flies. And I think that much was true for the games as well in terms of the growth and development for us, because we were so busy and so invested and like passionate about doing it and having a good time doing it that we didn't just realize how quickly we got from point A to point B, or how different point A was from point B. which is, I mean, now I get to kind of reflect on it a little bit more, and it's pretty cool.
How do you react to like this? Like, I mean, since you've been there to the beginning, I mean, in terms of developing where the sport is now, in terms of like how the sport is showcased, how do you look at it now that things are mixing up a lot and surprisingly a lot in this past year?
Well, it's kind of interesting. So, I mean, to start, just to be fair, like I didn't have a big hand in the early years of CrossFit. I was just kind of a production assistant that was I was a cog in the wheel, if you will. Um, but seeing all of the effort and time and energy and kind of manpower that went into building the games to what it was. I mean, I'll be honest, it was a little frustrating and a little tough. It was a tough pill to swallow to see a lot of it kind of torn down so quickly. Um, I mean, to be fair, I think the sanctional system is going to be great. Like, I think it has the potential to really kind of broaden the horizons of the CrossFit Games. But I also think that there was a way to accomplish that without necessarily tearing down and discarding a lot of the hard work and effort that was put in over the course of roughly a decade. So it's kind of like this give and take here. So I'm at the same time, I'm very happy and excited about where things are going, and what lies in terms of potential going forward for the CrossFit Games. But at the same time, it's also like, I'd be lying if I didn't say that, like, it didn't sting a little bit when, all of a sudden out of nowhere, me and a bunch of my friends were just kind of cast out. And a ton of stuff that we had worked for to kind of refine and improve, things like the regional system, things like the production and broadcast at the CrossFit Games, to see all of that just kind of, shoot off to the side. Like, I'm human. It's frustrating, it doesn't mean that we don't get to keep doing that, or it's the end of all of that altogether. But then I guess over time, that kind of slowly eased up, because obviously with that door kind of closing, it opened up some opportunities. And for us, as members of the community and people that are dedicated to the cause and the effort, it was a good test in seeing, okay, during our time at CrossFit, we were able to develop and build and do all these skills through the opportunities that we had at CrossFit. All right, now how can we take that, extract what we've learned and worked on and built, and now apply that to the new system to help make it successful. So it's a good exercise in making sure that the tools that we built are good for more than just one job, if that makes sense.
Oh, totally. So like a lot of mixed feelings, but like just one of the biggest fear from me, from a spectator perspective, was well, what's going to happen with all the media that I used to consume, right? And if I'm thinking that, well, that means that a million of other people are thinking that. And I think that you and many other people that used to work at CrossFit um, have managed a way to find their own business and develop something that created maybe something even better. What are your thoughts about, like, do you think it's like opening a bigger door now that like the mixed feelings are gone?
Yeah, I do. And um, I also think that, like, if I had, like, I think it's kind of like this two-way street, right? Like, I could let those mixed feelings kind of build and create resentment and poison my outlook going forward, or I can use that as fuel and help that push us along towards the next thing, which I hope we've done the latter. And in the end, I think I said this in another podcast recently. I had a conversation with Matt O'Keefe, who's the president of Loud and Live Sports, and we were talking after the games. He goes, "Dude, just, in kind of retrospect, like reflecting, like, this is going to be one of the best things that's ever happened to you guys, just because of the opportunities that it opens up and the freedom that it creates for us from a media perspective." And I totally agree, but I don't think it's like a finite statement. A lot of times people are like, "Oh, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me," and that's the end of the story. For me, it's a multi-conditional statement. So, like, it is going to be the best thing that's happened to us, but it's up to us to continually earn the right to be able to say that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, it's not like, oh, we got to a point and this is the best thing that's ever happened to us, now we can just sit back. It's like, no, it's our responsibility every day to continue to work and provide media and provide value, and make sure that that statement continues to be true as well, and not just isn't true for a fleeting moment or a particular season or anything like that. So we're trying to build something through this turn of events and opportunities that's permanent and long lasting, and can provide value for, much longer than our tenure at CrossFit was, if that makes sense.
And does Talking Elite Fitness have the same kind of mission that you guys always had in your head, or are you directing it through something that you want to grow it a different way?
Well, I think the general guiding principles and mission statement for us is always going to be the same, because I think that is more an extension of our own personal beliefs and core values, right? I don't think I think our kind of driving mission and principles that carried us through CrossFit are the same. Were not unique to CrossFit. They were more unique to us as a workforce and as a community. And I think that's reflected in general in the CrossFit community at large. And so I think anything that we do from here on out is going to kind of carry that same flag, or bear that same torch. And so I think in general, it certainly does. Now, what that looks like in terms of output, in terms of what the media looks like, could be vastly different. You can have, I think just in general, because we're a podcast, Talking Elite Fitness is a podcast, we have a slightly different presentation deck and a slightly different kind of expression of what those core values and principles are, because unlike the update show, we have an hour to kind of wax poetic about, the things that are going on, versus the update show, for example, we were generally confined to about the 8-minute time window. Generally speaking, that at the time, that was what we found was the sweet spot for attention spans and information presentation for fans of the sport. So I think now we get to kind of express it in a slightly different way. I personally really enjoy the podcast format. As you can tell, I enjoy talking, but I think it's gonna look slightly different, but it's still the same. I don't know. We're still the same people, and still the same mission that we're trying to carry forward.
I have it. Well, maybe because you hang out with these people, and you all of you guys in the media have developed a little bit more. I think that what I've seen from my perspective is a really nice evolution of each of your brands. But I have this feeling that there's somebody that has been left out and is not feeling the same evolution. And I think that Dave Castro is that guy. And do you have any insights on, like, I don't know, how he feels about the games and like the programming and all that stuff?
I can't speak for him specifically, just because I think that would be I don't want to be in any way, shape or form disrespectful to Dave, because Dave has been a huge supporter of mine and my personal journey, and in my time at CrossFit and my time coming up was always supportive of the things I wanted to do and had my back. So I don't want to necessarily speak for him when I can't, necessarily, I don't want to put words in his mouth. But obviously, like, a lot of the changes directly affected his role and his team, the team that we all kind of built together under his watch as well. But I also think Dave's greatest attribute is that he can remain steadfast in the midst of a rapidly changing and often difficult environment. In general, I think that is what probably made him and I can't speak from experience, obviously. This is a little bit outside of my realm of expertise, but I'd imagine that's what made him a great military person, a great Navy SEAL, which allowed him to reach the elite echelons of the SEAL teams and stuff like that. And I think it's what's allowed him to really kind of build the games into the worldwide phenomena that it's become. He bears a lot of, deserves a lot of the credit for helping build the games to what they were. And I think that even though a lot of the changes might affect him directly, I think he's focused and, I guess, like I've kind of mentioned, steadfast enough to make sure that he doesn't get all up in arms and flustered and can continue to be a part of what the games will be in the future. So, I mean, and again, it's very similar to what I said about the podcast for us. It may look a little bit different, you know, it may not look like as much attention and stuff on his personal brand, but I think similar to us, the core mission statement and the core principle are still there for him. And I think that's what's important.
Well, on my side, I found this games was probably the most entertaining that I have been in the past years, and I really appreciate it. Of course, I think the cuts should have been done a little later, but like, I mean, everything was just like it seemed more. There was a good follow up of everything that was going on, in my perspective.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it depends. Like, I won't deny that the final day of competition was super exciting to watch. It's almost like honestly, it's kind of funny because in reality, it was essentially the same day of competition, just flip flopped for genders. Because last year, the men's competition was decided by the final day.
Yes.
And then it was a tight race for the women's competition. This year, the women's competition was decided by the final day, and then it was a nice race for the men's competition. So the reality of like the excitement and stuff like that is it's not too much different. It's just different players we're seeing being involved now. Like we're seeing Matt pushed this year. We saw Tia basically dominate and run away with it. So from a bigger picture perspective, it was very similar, but we got to see some, like I said, we got to see some different players get involved in the mix. And I know I would tend to agree with you about some of the cuts. And I think that was the cuts, and the decision to do that was kind of centered around some very early directives that they were given to play with. I think it was kind of made clear that they had to have 10 people by the time that they did. So
in terms of the logistics,
yeah, well, I mean, like in an interview, I believe, or a podcast, I mean, Greg stated that he wanted to have 10 athletes, like basically all the way through the weekend. So, and definitely by Sunday. So I think that was kind of one of the starting points that they came out of the blocks with, or came out of the gates with. It's like, we got to have 10 athletes by this point in time in the competition. So how do we get there?
Right.
So if you kind of look at it that way, then, you know, you're only given so much room to work with there. I think already we've seen signs that the games team and everybody at HQ are starting to kind of shift a little bit with the announcement that the first cut won't happen until 3 events in and won't happen until the second day. So I think they're already making adjustments to fine tune this process. And like, I mean, I've been critical of what's happened so far, but at the same time, I think where I could walk that back a little bit is understand that it's the first year of a new system, and that it's going to take some time to fine tune it as well.
I think you're well known for how good you are to analyze every little detail about the athletes, their performances.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Who are the athletes? There can be a lot. Who are the athletes that surprise you the most?
Well, looking at the games this year, it's kind of tough because I don't want to say that I was surprised as much, but someone that really impressed me was, for the women in particular, was Haley Adams.
Oh, same.
In general, we haven't really seen some of the teenage athletes that have been dominant in years past be able to make the jump to the individual competition so quickly. You look at some of the past teenage champions. Nick Palladino won 2 years. Angelo DiCicco won multiple titles as well. And both of them, Angelo for injury reasons, same with Nick a little bit too, haven't been able to quite make the jump. But Haley was basically competitive as an individual from the time she was still a teenager, making regionals and really kind of being in the hunt for an individual bid last year. And so to see her qualify and then be able to make, even with all the extenuating circumstances of the cuts and the programming leading into the cuts, to be one of those top 10 athletes in those particular events compared to the rest of the field is still incredibly impressive for a young woman who is just about to start her freshman year of college. She's 18 going on 19, maybe just turned 19, and is about to move into her freshman dorm. How many freshmen in college or university can you look left and right and be like, you're one of the fittest people on the planet right now? And to me, that's just, that speaks volumes of her work ethic, and the time that she's put in with the CrossFit Mayhem crew. And it makes me really excited for what the future may hold for her, because it was certainly an impressive performance. I guess maybe another athlete that kind of stood out to me on the women's side was Danielle Brandon. She finished 11th. She had an event win in the second event, and she had another top 5 in the sprint couplet. And granted, they're a little bit shorter events, some heavy gymnastic stuff, but she was an athlete that didn't get a lot of attention coming into the games, and still hasn't gotten a lot of attention yet. But on any given year, if an athlete finishes 11th at the CrossFit Games and wins an event in their rookie year, we're talking about them left and right. And I think amidst some of the chaos and uncertainty of the format, some of these stories are getting lost in the wash a little bit. And she's going to be certainly one of them. But hopefully, as things start to level out and we have a little bit clearer directive and narrative going forward, then she's another athlete we can talk about a little bit more at length. So those definitely be two athletes, maybe on the women's side. Let's see. I kind of mentioned it earlier this year. I was super impressed with Amanda Barnhart in her second year.
Man, yeah.
I think it's unfortunate because, and I'll be clear, injuries in sports happen. It's always you can always play the, well, if this, then that kind of game in sports. But you look at Amanda Barnhart finishing 7th with a really badly injured ankle that was injured from the ruck run on, pretty much. So she competed a large majority of the competition with a busted up ankle and still finished 7th. I think that's incredibly impressive. And she looks like someone who could maybe be one of the, along with Carrie Pierce too, and Haley Adams, as part of this American contingent that can maybe break the streak, because there hasn't been an American on the podium since 2014. So for the women's side, that is.
Yeah.
So it's like, the American women are trying to break that streak a little bit. I think she's one of them. Let's see. Let me think about the men for a sec. I mean, I think it's obviously, I loved seeing kind of Noah come into his own this year. Big fan of Noah. I think he's a super good guy. He had kind of gotten, pigeonholed into the whole, like, he's always makes a mistake. There's always something that holds him back. He can kind of be his own worst enemy in that regard. And it was very nice. And I think this is generally, when it comes to someone who's a good person, generally speaking, it's always nice to see someone kind of blossom in their athletic role and do so on the biggest stage. A lot of times we see athletes kind of have their coming out party at regionals, or kind of we see the best version of them, like hints of their best version of themselves early on in the season. And that wasn't the case with Noah. Noah had kind of had an up and down season a little bit, had a rough go at Wadapalooza to start, had to battle back. Maybe didn't have the best weekend at Rogue. And there was, quite where he's generally a podium contender or generally in the conversation for that. Maybe those talks had kind of cooled off a little bit. And so we came into the games maybe with less pressure on his shoulders, but pretty early on, it was pretty clear that he was operating at a different level than we're used to seeing him. Not just physically, and I don't mean physically, because he's always been able to operate at a high level physically, but it felt like the kind of restrictor plate was taken off finally mentally, and he was really enjoying himself, and also kind of being like allowing himself to kind of ride the emotional wave in a way that's going to benefit him. For some athletes, it can really be a hindrance, but other athletes, if you allow yourself to kind of ride the ups and downs and really take advantage of the ups, then you can kind of tap into some performance and some capacity that we may not have seen from you before. And I thought that was true in Mary for Noah, and I thought that was true in the sprint event. And I don't think Noah had beaten Matt in a swim event since 2014, 2015. So Matt had gotten the better of Noah in the swim events the last few years. And suddenly it felt like Noah wasn't shying away from competing with Matt on that swim event, and came out and went for it. And it's cool to see, ultimately he finished second, and ultimately I think the right person won. Um, but it's also super cool to see like Noah kind of break out of that shell and find another gear at the CrossFit Games. Let's see. Definitely impressed with Matt McLeod, the Aussie. He's an interesting case because I feel like he's going to get a little bit of flack from people based on like he's someone that in my conversations with people that maybe are like, does he make it in the top 10 on another year with different programming kind of situation? But he's also a person you have to give credit to that he showed up on game day and he performed the task that was asked of him, and he did so in a manner that was better than a bunch of the other athletes that were behind him. And as a result, he gets to, enjoy a performance in the top 10. He gets to walk away. I think he had 2 event wins, actually. Yeah, he had 2 event wins. Yeah, let me double check that actually. I want to make sure I get my stat. Yeah, 2 event wins in the sprint couplet and the swim. And how many people can say that they won 2 events in their rookie season at CrossFit Games? So regardless of what the programming or what the public opinion might be around that, it was a super impressive year for him. And then maybe one other I might talk about would be Will Morad. It's unfortunate that he got hurt and he had a pulled hamstring once he made the top 10. But Will is a guy that I've covered at length this season in terms of his comeback from a misdiagnosis of an autoimmune disorder. And he basically was under the assumption that his CrossFit career was over a couple of years ago as a result of that. And he also had kidney failure. And suddenly he gets word that he doesn't have the autoimmune disorder and he can get back to training. And before he knows it, he's, back into the elite rungs of CrossFit and makes the games in his first kind of full comeback season. And then he gets to make the top 10, his best finish.
Better than all the other times he was there, right?
Yeah. So he actually tied Eric Carmody for the longest distance between CrossFit Games appearances. So he made the games in 2014 and he hasn't been back since. And so him and Carmody both made it in 2014 and then qualified again in 2019. So to be able to like make it back after such a big gap and do so and perform really well is certainly impressive.
Because you're getting older, but I mean, like your recovery isn't getting that better. But I mean, like that's hard work.
Generally speaking, it's a young person's sport, just from a recovery standpoint. But some of us old guys still got a few good punches left in us.
How do you use your training now? Has your own training changed across the past year, like evolving as an entrepreneur a little bit more?
Yeah, I definitely, I don't want to say I appreciate my training more, but maybe in some ways that's true. When I was working at CrossFit, the gym, we had a gym right beneath us. We could go work out anytime. We were kind of free as long as we got our work done to go down and train whenever it was needed. And for the most part, our schedules were relatively known. So it was very easy to plan your training and mix that into your daily life. And then, this is probably I'm more in line with the experience that everybody else has, because that's kind of a very fortunate and blessed situation. But now, I guess in this entrepreneurial role, my schedule day to day isn't very well known. A lot of it can change, by the hour and by the day. So mapping out a consistent training schedule, unless I'm going super early or super late, is difficult. So, whereas I might have taken for granted the luxury of being able to train when I need to, I definitely don't do that anymore. And I take great care of when I do get the opportunity to train, that I value it and I try to get the most out of it. And that kind of has its carryover into other areas of life too, right? If I'm making sure that I'm purposeful when I go into the gym. I definitely do more classes, like regular classes now, which, is fantastic and I love. And so it allows me to know that when I'm there for that hour, it's one of the best hours of my day and I'm there to get fit and work on a handful of things. and get my exercise in, and, you know, keep moving through my day. And now that's allowed me to kind of, I guess, time manage a little bit better, you know, and not just with training, but with everything else, knowing that like when I need to go do something, I got to be purposeful with it and be efficient with it. And that, I mean, that has tons of carryover basically in every other facet of life. And I, I also like to, you know, train martial arts, so that the discipline of that has, you know, tons of carryover and great benefit to me as well.
Do you go to the same gym that you used to go when you were at CrossFit, or you just you found a new gym and you started going there?
So we typically trained on a daily basis at the gym at CrossFit HQ. But if I wasn't training at that gym, I was training at the gym that I currently train at now, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
So like if we're during the weekends or on Sundays, or especially for open workouts, I would go to CrossFit West Santa Cruz, excuse me, and that's where I train at now. So I had already, you know, built relationships within that gym, and had kind of involved myself to some degree in their community. And so when we got laid off from CrossFit HQ, just naturally moved to that gym and wanted to be a part of that community, and they welcomed me with open arms. So I'm very fortunate to train there. They actually just moved locations, and they actually moved closer to where I live, so I can actually run to the gym now, which is nice. So it's not too bad.
That's awesome, man. Um, I always finish off my podcast with three questions, and
Sure.
I don't send them out anymore because it's better. It's more spontaneous.
Yeah.
So my first question is, if you would have a country that you would have to move to forever and go work there, apart from the States, where would that be and why?
It, it would be Spain, and it would be Barcelona, the city.
Oh, really? And why is
Yes.
that?
Um, to me, there's a few things, and actually, I have a friend of mine that probably summed it up better than I probably ever could. Her name's Adi Kaju. She owns Working Against Gravity. She recently just spent like 6 weeks in Europe, but she summed up some of my thoughts pretty perfectly on her Instagram. So if you look up Adi Kaju, you can find it. But I'll try and explain it here. There's a couple of things that I noticed in particular that stood out when I was there, in terms of the things that they value very much. One, they very much value activity and kind of movement in the outdoors. Everything feels like it's walking distance or like biking distance, and there's like a social aspect of Barcelona that I really like as a result of that. The neighborhoods are kind of grouped where like they're built into these like little squares, and every square either has like a coffee shop or a little restaurant or a church or some sort of gathering place where people can kind of commune and talk and discuss. Um, and it feels very much like the American neighborhoods felt, you know, maybe 20, 30 years ago, where it was much more social, and you had a much better relationship and deeper relationship with the people that you lived around and chose to, you know, set up roots around. So I really enjoyed that. They also don't seem overly consumed with like kind of the rat race of work that we have here in the States sometimes. Um, Sometimes I feel like a lot of times in the United States, we get kind of trapped into this, like, you got to work, you got to work, you got to work, you got to make money, you got to make money, you got to make money, then you can go enjoy life. And I feel like they've kind of reshuffled those priorities and to be like, hey, like, we want to work and we want to make some money so we can enjoy life, but we don't want to put enjoying life on the back burner so far away that we're missing out on doing that on a regular basis, you know, in our earlier years. So I feel like they have a really good work-life balance there. And that really was apparent to me when I visited there last year, in terms of, sure, that may mean stores and things aren't open as late or as round the clock like they are here in the States, but nobody seems to mind about that. And nobody seems to care that all that much. And they seem to enjoy taking part in some of the more social aspects of living there, and, you know, exploring the city, and, you know, knowing their neighbors and all those things. And so that really resonated with me. It just felt like one of those places, like I could live here, and this feels like home to me.
That's awesome, man. I just want to go right now.
Yeah, I'm hopefully going back this year, so I'm really stoked. I really enjoyed the community there too. Had a great time training at some of the boxes there. The food, the music culture scene, some of the art, like all the Gaudi installations there are fantastic. So it's just a beautiful city.
So it's kind of that place where
The vibe there was really good. What was
so,
that?
so it's kind of that go-to place that that you won't hesitate. That's nice.
Yeah, yeah, and we were there a week after the terrorist attack happened 2 years ago. So someone basically stole a truck and drove it down Las Ramblas, which is like their main stretch of road, and you know killed a bunch of people, and it was kind of just an awful event, and it happened right in the heart of the city, and like one of the most popular, well-driven, well-trafficked streets. And I was amazed at also the resiliency of the spirit that kind of permeated everything around it. There was this beautiful memorial there, but at the same time, it didn't feel like downtrodden and didn't feel sad and overly like beaten down by it. It was like, hey, this happened. This act doesn't represent us. It's unfortunate what happened, but rather than let it beat us down, we're going to be kind of emboldened by it. We're going to continue on with our way of life in the face of that kind of adversity. And that like it spoke volumes to me, and it really struck me. So, and that was kind of, I think, the foundation for me kind of falling in love with that city.
Awesome. My next question is, what is Tommy's fetish song? So what is the song that pops in people's ears when you get into a new room?
Ooh. Oh man, that's tough.
That's the hardest.
So I'm a like, I feel like everyone says they love music, but like there's not a type of music that I don't like. Like depending on the mood and the people and the atmosphere, you can put anything on at a given time and I'll be in love with it. Doesn't matter if it's the heaviest death metal you can find, whether it's country music, whether it's top 40 pop, whether it's electronic dance music, whether it's, and also all ranges of dance music, whether it's, house, techno, all that good stuff. Um, or mood music or bluegrass. It's kind of hard for me to pick one. I would say the best answer I can give is it would depend on who's in the room and what we're doing.
I
So,
love it.
So if we're sitting around like, you know, um, if we're sitting around like playing a board game or, having a drink and, talking about old times, obviously something that fits that mood better. If we're about to 1 rep max deadlift and we're raging out, then something to max that too. So it's kind of hard for me to pick one if that's a good non-answer.
That's a good non-answer.
Yeah.
If ever you think about it, it'll go through your head today. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Like I would say, generally speaking, though, usually some electronic music or some like classic rock is usually rolling. So
Awesome.
with the occasional country. So.
And my last question is, what would be one piece of advice you would give to a 10-year younger Tommy?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Mm. It would kind of be a multi-tiered one, but one would be, the first thing I would say was stop and read more, because I think taking that now, like now knowing what I know now, I guess the little that I know now, taking the time to do something for yourself, such as read and kind of bring yourself some level of, I don't know, calm and peace, and being present in that moment is important. And it's something that I learned, I don't think I appreciated enough. But also, the simplest way I can put it is stick to your guns. the principles and guiding philosophies that you've built for yourself are enough. And don't let anyone else dictate those for you. Because I feel like maybe a younger Tommy would be a little bit more concerned or worried about what other people's guiding principles are and try and morph to that versus, being confident in what your own are and sticking to those and letting those kind of guide you in the path that you're going to end up going on anyways. So that makes sense.
That makes total sense. That's kind of deep, man.
It's I feel like it's fitting for where I was back then, I guess, thinking about it. I mean, 10 years ago, I'm 23, just finished college, had no idea what I was doing in the world. But I felt like I had a decent idea of who I was, like who I am at my core. And that was something that was kind of as a result of like who my parents were and how good of parents that I had. So even though you don't necessarily know your place in the world, you can know who you are, and then the rest will sort itself out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Where can people follow you? What are all the socials? People can reach out and see what you guys do.
Sure. So our podcast is at Talking Elite Fitness on Instagram, and you can also look it up by Talking Elite Fitness on Facebook. Our website will be launching. Our full website will be launching in the next week. It'll be talkingelitefitness.com. Right now, our merchandise store is live. It's store.talkingelitefitness.com. We've got like our t-shirts and coffee mugs and some cool stuff there. On social media, I'm at Tommy Marquez, TommyMarquez. My partner in the podcast, Sean Woodland, he's SWoodland53, and that's pretty much where you can find us all. So, and I encourage anyone to reach out and come chat with us.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate, you having me on the podcast, and I love talking shop and love talking about all this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'd like to, I always like to do like a first little introduction like this and get into that. And if ever you're open to get on to the podcast, maybe a little later, and maybe like after some big news or something like that. And you're like, even when in the section of this podcast, when we were talking about the athletes that surprised you, I felt there was a little spark in your head, and like there was something that changed, and you were kind of into your world, and I really love that. Like when the spark happens to someone, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I'm always happy to come on, man. So cool. Feel free to reach out.
Cool, thank you.